Good morning, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, without further ado, let's get into the news this Tuesday morning. The Supreme Court will decide if President Biden's student debt forgiveness program is constitutional or not. Biden plans to argue that the current education secretary has the right to forgive debt during a pandemic using the HEROES Act. However, it is unclear if the conservative-heavy Supreme Court will side with Biden or, as some critics have suggested, limit his authority to do such a thing. Now, what do you think will happen? This seems to have the country divided: those that have student loan debt? This is an answer to their prayers, and those that don't or have already paid it off say this is unnecessary and unfair. One of Putin's self-proclaimed military experts, Konstantin Sivkov, has claimed that Russia could strike America's Yellowstone supervolcano with a nuke or hypersonic missile if it wanted. He stated that the strike would cause a massive eruption that could take out nearly half the country. German professor Johann Gutenberg admitted the situation was possible, but concluded that Russia likely won't make this move, or else the world would end in nuclear warfare attacks. Basically, they would fire a missile and the rest of the United States would counter-fire missiles, and it would end up just basically blowing everything to kingdom come. So either way, this is something that could happen and is pretty scary, if it were to be hit, as it could trigger that eruption. But I think what's scarier is that people are sitting around in Russia right now coming up with ways to make attacks that would inflict maximum damage on NATO nations or amplify a natural disaster, leading to more death and more destruction. As Russia continues to threaten its competition, President Putin has continued to play victim by stating in today's conditions, when all the leading NATO countries have declared their main goal is inflicting a strategic defeat on US, Russia, so that our people suffer, as they say, how can we ignore their nuclear possibilities in these conditions? I do not even know if such an ethnic group as the Russian people will be able to survive in the form in which it exists today. Now, while I do agree that the West is likely using this opportunity to humble Russia, it's not good to have a world leader controlling 1,000s of nuclear bombs, feeling backed into a corner, believing that NATO wants to wipe his nationality off the earth. So this is going from like a war between Russia and Ukraine to a war between NATO and Russia to now Russia feeling like this is genocide. And they're feeling backed into a corner. So this is where it gets scary, because paranoia and fear could easily overtake reason, and then dumb decisions are made. Senator Lindsey Graham says he wants the United States military to send F-16 jets to Ukraine to take down Putin and ensure that Zelensky wins. Ukrainian President Zelensky warned that Americans who don't support giving aid to Ukraine risk losing NATO, US clout and leadership position globally. Zelensky believes that if Putin captures Ukraine, he will continue to threaten NATO countries, forcing the United States to send their own soldiers into war. It's unclear if Zelensky is trying to scare Americans into continuing to support Ukraine, or if his warning has any validity. But let me know your thoughts down below. Do you feel like this is kinda becoming blackmail? Or war shame? Where it's like, hey, if you don't support giving us all your money and all your weapons, then you're just as bad as Putin, right? That's kind of the way that it comes across. The Wall Street Journal has reported that the White House and members of Congress provided them with a classified intelligence report from the Energy Department of the United States, which claims the COVID pandemic most likely arose from a laboratory leak in Wuhan, China. Following the release of the story, Republican Senator Rand Paul stated that the documents all need to be declassified. Republican Senator Josh Hawley went a step further and committed to introducing legislation that would declassify the government's intelligence reports on everything to do with COVID. Now China, of course, denies the lab leak theory and says the United States is trying to paint them as evil. A new report out of China shows that China might not have been honest with the world when it comes to how much gold they are buying and holding. Analysts are saying that the private bank, and the public bank, the People's Bank of China, or the PBOC, likely bought twice as much gold last year, as was publicly reported. To keep it secret, they made it look like one central bank was buying, when in reality, both banks were buying the same amount. That way, they could hide how much they were buying and hoarding to throw people off. Now, it's not clear what they're trying to do. This could be their belief that by having a gold-backed currency, like before the 1970s, it increases their chances of becoming the new dominant world reserve currency. But as of right now, we don't really know what China's intentions are. Folks, You have to ask why Democrats in media wanted to withhold exculpatory evidence, possible exculpatory evidence in the form of 44,000 hours of video and security footage from that fateful day, terrible day in January 2 years ago. Okay, I condemn that day should never have taken place. I also condemn to want the $1 to $2 billion in property damage, 14,000 arrests, and 19 lives lost according to Wikipedia that summer. I support why people peacefully demonstrated that summer. I do support the cause. I'm not equating the underlying reasons for why people went to the streets between January and between that summer. I'm not saying that they're morally relative, or they're the same. I am not. I support why people demonstrated peacefully that summer. However, there is no justification for any chaos or mayhem that causes $1 to $2 billion in property damage. You're looking at media and Democrats focusing on one day, because it suits them politically, ignoring an entire summer, because it suits them politically, and then they hide behind, well, the causes for the demonstrations are different. Yeah, the causes are different. Are you saying that justifies $1 to $2 billion in property damage? If so, then make that your position? That's not their vantage point. So Democrats in media oftentimes hide within the shadows of these viewpoints. They don't really want to say, yeah, political chaos and mayhem is fantastic if the underlying cause is just. They don't want to actually state that out loud. Some people actually do. But that is obviously a vantage point they can't defend. So I'm speaking in a verbose manner, long-winded because I have to, but there's security footage that will almost certainly help 34 defendants still in DC jail, awaiting trial because for January 2 years ago, they've been in confinement for 2 years. Now, you got to ask yourself, you had Democrats bailing out people who committed crimes. Some of these individuals committed even more crimes after they were bailed out by Democrats. This is a fact. Okay. You have to ask why they want such political retribution. The retribution goes only one way if they feel that it's undermining democracy. Oh, my God. They're gonna get their political retribution. An entire summer didn't undermine democracy. According to CNN, it was firing but mostly peaceful with a reporter in front of a building in flames. But now you have a large number of people who pled guilty. Didn't have access to the security footage. Tucker Carlson is going to give people access to security footage. Okay, the world. Now, MSNBC, CNN, NBC, Washington Post. They all want that same security footage that Tucker Carlson has. I say them? Fantastic. The more that people get to see the entire picture, the better. And the interesting thing is you have outlets say, well, we want Tucker Carlson security footage. We want what Kevin McCarthy gave to Carlson we're going to show that they've already edited the January committee has already edited the video in the footage. They're talking about security concerns. There was again on the entire summer where they didn't care about security concerns. They also never cared about security concerns after the Dogs decision, when you had conservative justices and you had churches, and you had facilities throughout the country being torched or destroyed. When you only care about one form of political chaos and mayhem, and you ignore another form political chaos and mayhem, you are a sinister type of individual. And we have these types of individuals in Congress. They grandstand and they pontificate only when it suits them. And then they want to disarm Americans as they pay 20-30 grand for security details every year. But hit subscribe to this channel. Ladies and gentlemen, March is going to be a very, very interesting month. You're going to have Fox News and Tucker Carlson do the right thing, show the entire picture where there might be exculpatory evidence there. It frees prisoners or at least helps prisoners battle their court case and actually get to trial. You might have retrials, you might have people who pled guilty, saying, hey, wait a second, this proves exactly what I've been saying. You might have a completely new narrative. There might be investigations into people who weren't supposed to be there that day in January, fomenting a certain type of, we'll just call it again, narrative. And so they held back exculpatory video footage, evidence, because it didn't suit them. That's the problem. Other Channel 23 and 24 are going to be very important years for American history. You might see Hillary Clinton become the first female president or the second female president. If Biden resigns, and Vice President Harris becomes president, who anything is possible politically, okay, because Democratic pundits will, and constituents and voters will defend the indefensible. And all times, or I should say not at all times. But if there's a man of prevailing paradigm of thought, they'll go with it no matter what. And I say this with love and respect. There are beautiful, amazing, wonderful liberal Democrats. And if you're on the left, right, doesn't matter, Senator, God bless you if you're watching, and have a beautiful day, and I wish you only the best in 23. But you have to ask yourself why 14,000 arrests took place an entire summer. There were curfews in every major city. Again, I am not equating the underlying reasons for the demonstrations. I understand the reason for the demonstration, and I support the reason why people peacefully demonstrated that summer. Okay. But the property damage, the chaos, the curfews, the mayhem, the lives lost, the arrests. I mean, it's exponentially worse than that. That one day, and you had federal buildings, and you had government buildings, and you had police departments that were targeted by people who were not peaceful. And you have this effort, this concerted effort, when CNN said firing, but mostly peaceful. Technically, you could possibly say that about January was mostly peaceful. I mean, if you look at the aggregate number of people there in DC, according to CNN, they would say it was mostly peaceful. I'm not saying it's mostly peaceful, they would say it was mostly peaceful. But now you have a situation where people are still languishing in jail. They haven't been given the opportunity to have a trial. And this is you have Democrats who convinced themselves that you have these people trying to overthrow democracy or the country, and they use a word, it doesn't even fit the legal definition of, okay, what took place that day is the same thing that took place almost every day that summer. They didn't see things that way, though. Okay, that's like a political chaos and mayhem, if it's from the left, is never viewed as undermining democracy. Okay. And that's something that Trump has to acknowledge. And he can't put himself in a position like that ever again. Okay. So the thing that Trump did wrong was trying to repeat or trying to act in the same manner as Democrats would if they were upset. They just can't do those. There's a double standard that Trump has to acknowledge and work around. Not saying that he just has to acquiesce because of a double standard. I'm saying there's a double standard he has to acknowledge. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Double crossing could very well be freeing prisoners, or at least expediting trials because of the security footage. It's exculpatory evidence, almost certainly in many cases, especially for people who pled guilty who didn't want to plead guilty, and there were a lot of people like that. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Open Source News. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification